Welcome to PhotoshopUser TV, brought to you by the National Association of Photoshop Professionals. And now, here are your hosts, the Photoshop guys.
Hi everyone, welcome to PhotoshopUser TV. I'm Corey Barker, and today I'm joined by, as usual, Mr. Pete Collins. Hello.
How's it going, Corey?
I'm good. How are you?
It's good to be here.
It is.
I like us being up front. I have moved out of the weather station for a little bit, but that's because we have a special guest.
We do, in fact, have a very special guest today. I've been trying to get him over here for a long time, and here he is. What is it, 20-plus year?
21.
21-year veteran Disney animator, feature film animator, Mr. Aaron Blaise. How are you?
I'm great.
We're so glad you can make it finally.
I'm happy to be here.
So
this is great.
We've been after Aaron for some time, and Aaron and we kind of go back. We knew each other back when I lived in Orlando, but we kind of have another thing in common. We went to the same school, went to Ringling.
Clown school.
Ringling, well, it's Ringling College of Art now.
Yeah,
right.
It was Ringling School of Art and Design back in the day, but it's Ringling College now. But you graduated just a few years before I started there.
1989.
And
so I'm an old guy.
He's been there a while, and he goes way back. He worked on, you go all the way back to working on Beauty and the Beast.
My first film was Rescuers Down Under, and everything all the way up through Brother Bear, which is a film I directed. Lion King, Mulan, Pocahontas, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, all of them,
All the great ones. So,
So not that good a resume is what you're saying.
Nah, it's all right.
Yeah, so he's only accomplished a few things in his life so far. But we are so excited to have him on the show. He's going to be showing us some very special stuff that he's been working on with Photoshop and using this antique a little bit later in the show. But first off, let's get some stuff out of the way. We are, of course, brought to you by the National Association of Photoshop Professionals, who bring you
Dun-dun-dun.
PhotoshopUser magazine. And be sure to check out the most current issue because it has our annual holiday gear guide. So if you're wondering what gifts to buy all of us here on the show, check out the magazine and check out our wish list. They didn't put our wish list in the show, did they?
No, not really.
Not this time?
Just Scott's, I think.
We asked for too many expensive things, is why. Okay, so let's kick things off. I'm going to start off by doing a quick little tutorial.
Oh, wait, no, we got to do it proper. I need to throw it to you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Hey, Corey,
Hey.
do you have a tutorial for us?
Why, yes, Pete, I do.
Well, why don't you show us what you got?
I shall. All right, so I've got a really quick thing with brushes today. Since we're going to be talking about art and brushing and sketching and stuff like that, why not? So a little fun I have with layer styles and brushes in Photoshop is that I created a brush recently. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and open my brush panel up here so we can see. There is, somewhere in here, I don't have enough brushes going on here. So I created this lightning brush here. You can see it's just got a little bit of lightning going on there. That's kind of cool. So I wanted to figure out a way to kind of create this streak of electricity on a brush. Now here's a cool way to go out and start doing that. I'm going to go and start with a regular round brush here. Let's make it a little bit smaller. So it's a bit of a soft edge brush, and that's okay. So I'm going to go over here into my brush options here, because this is where the fun happens. So let's take and add a dual brush. This is something that's really cool about Photoshop, is that you can have two different brushes interacting with each other through the use of a blend mode. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and locate that lightning brush that I created. Yeah, it's already selected there, right there. And the blend mode up here, I'm going to set it to overlay. Now if you go down here and mess around with these sliders, you'll notice how that brush interacts with this existing brush. And as I paint, it kind of gives me this electric, feel to it. Electric boogaloo. There you go. Good job. So it's not just a streak, it's got all these little sparks and everything happening. But that's not enough. So I'm just going to paint a little bit there. And let's add a layer style to it. So I'm going to go and double click on the layer and grab it, and let's do an outer glow on this. And let's set it to electric blue. I just had to say that out loud. So I'm going to increase the size of the glow a little bit and the spread a little bit to make it a little bit more energetic there. And let's change the blend mode to hard light, so it gives me a little bit more harsh glow there. Then I'm going to set
almost kind of a neon look.
Yes, indeed. And let's go ahead and add an inner glow as well. Let's kind of do a similar blue, and again, let's do hard light on that, and let's increase that a little bit.
Now let me ask you, while you're doing this, when you're playing with something like this, do you have in your mind, okay, I'm going to add an inner glow and an outer glow, or do you just go in a lot of times and just play and see how they show up?
At this point, I mean, even still, I mean, I was going to say, at this point, I am consciously thinking I'm going to use an inner and outer glow to get this effect, but before, I would just experiment. I mean, I'm still not knowing for sure if an inner glow is going to work or if it's not. Oftentimes it's just a matter of trying something to see if it works. And then if it's, the great thing about digital is that if I decide the integral doesn't work, I'll just turn it off.
See, and I think a lot of people think you automatically, or we automatically know the recipe for something. And so they're going to get caught up in, okay, what was that? What was that? How do I apply that? A lot of times it comes down to, you think you've got an idea of how it's going to work, but you got to play with it.
You can have a spark of an idea, or here's where I'm going to start, but then where it goes from there, it really doesn't, you really don't know. Now here's one last thing I'm going to add to this, because I thought this was really cool. And this goes back to what I'm talking about, using layer styles differently than what they're called. I'm going to add a drop shadow to this. Many of you might be thinking, a drop shadow? He's on a black background. How are you going to see the shadow? I can see it with my special glasses. No. I'm going to actually change the color of that drop shadow to a light blue, but I'm going to change the blend mode to dissolve. And what that does is gives me this kind of little speckly spark effect on that image. Now, if I can move that around, see that right there? But if I kind of center it on the element, it kind of looks like it's got this kind of electric spark thing happening. Now, the beauty of this, of course, is it's a layer style. I'm going to select everything and hit delete. And now I can go over here and just write my name in electric loveliness, or sketch in it, or do whatever I want like that. And it's going to pick up that layer style and apply it no matter what I do. So I can just try different scenarios. But what you can do is at this point, go ahead and save the brush. Now, when I tell people to save a brush, you got all the properties applied to it. Save it as a tool preset. Click on this very first icon up here, and just go over in this little wheel and just choose New Tool Preset. It'll save not just the brush tip, but all those settings I've applied to it with the dual brush and all those different settings, and even include the color if you've got a specific color on there as well. And then I can just call that up and use that brush anytime I want. So if anytime I want, oh, I want a piece of lightning or something going on here, grab that brush, boom, you're done. So just a fun way of combining brushes with layer styles to get more realistic effects in there. So.
Well, and I love that you talked about doing the tool preset, because a lot of people just automatically, they make a brush and they save it in the regular brush panel, but they don't keep color or any of those extra little options in there. And that's why you need to go over to the tool preset.
Yeah, it saves you from going in there. And notice I've got a long list of brushes here that I've gone. And a lot of them I don't use more than once. I'll do it and I'll go through the trouble of, I'm thinking, well, I may or may not use this. I'm going to go ahead and save it as a tool preset. Just in case. But oftentimes, I might find myself never using it at all, but I don't have to go back and redo it all over again. So, Pete, what have you got?
Well, hey, this is one for both photographers and designers, and what it is repurposing or thinking about using materials in a way that you might not think about. Boy, that was very clear. What I'm going to say is, here's how you can play with stuff. Let's say you're looking for certain tags or piece of paper. You want some elements that you're going to use in a composite, or you want to use it as a frame for putting a picture on it. A lot of times you'll overlook something like this. This is from Fotolia.com. It's just a stock image here. And the thing that I like about this is, if I did a search for paper and crinkly or whatever, I'll get a lot of blank pages. But I love stuff like this because a lot of people aren't going to think about using something like this for their elements. Because with one of my favorite tools, the spot healing brush, I can simply come in here, and if I make a copy of it, I can start just coming in and quickly going in and covering up, just painting over the text in here, and let the Photoshop do the work, and all of a sudden it's going to wipe out all that text, and I've got this great element right here that most people aren't going to think about using because they're not going to take the time to knock out any of that text. They're just going to see this text. Well, I'm not going to use this because it's got all that in there. But what I've done is I've created, just with this file right here, I've created a couple layers just by simply going in quickly with my spot healing brush, and I've knocked out some of those telltale markings or whatever. And now I've got this great collection of elements, and I can take it one step further. I like these number elements because they'd be great if I wanted to make some fake tickets or whatever, but if I want to use them simply as pieces of paper or something like that, I can take them all the way down to just blank. And it took me just a little while to work through each one of these, but now I've got this collection of great elements that I can use over and over again, and nobody else is really probably going to have these. One of the problems with using stock images is everybody else has access to those. So if you can find elements that you can use and give them your own personal touch, people can go, ooh, where'd you get that? And you'll go, oh, I got it on Fotolia, and they'll never be able to find it because you have used something unique that you've done yourself. And so that's kind of my tip, is using spot healing brush, thinking outside of the normal way of using things and create some great elements that you can use for yourself over and over again.
Catalog of
yeah, I've got a whole catalog of these where I've come in and I've cleaned up all that typing or whatever. But a lot of times I'll also combine them. Like, this is really where I like to keep it. So I go, oh, I've got these numbers. I may use these numbers somewhere else. They're just great to create fake paperwork or whatever. But I also have them as the blank section so I can use them for a tag for anything. So it's more kind of a, here's a thought for you. Try that. I love using the spot healing brush. It's gotten so much better, so much faster. I literally did all of that just by using the spot healing brush. Spot healing.
Spot on. All right. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break. When we get back, Aaron's going to share some stuff with us. We had to get our tips out of the way because we know Aaron's going to make us look like really beginners.
I got to hang out with you guys more often. I'm learning a ton here.
We want you to forget what you've learned here and just go bask in the awe of Aaron when we get back.
Be sure to stay with us. We will be right back. He's got some really cool stuff. Stay tuned. Stay here. Come back. All right.
All right, guys, well, you just missed the mad dash. Corey just made it across this vast studio in about 3 nanoseconds.
I had to clear my desk.
What you may not realize is that we're setting up for Aaron to give his great presentation, and Corey was doing that, but we wanted to come back and say, guys, if you pay attention to nothing else today, watch what Aaron's going to do. It's just phenomenal. We are excited to have him.
Now, just to kind of lead it into this, I actually, if you check out Aaron's website, and we're going to have that link up for you later, but it's aaronblaiseart.blogspot.com. Go over there and check this out. He's been doing some remarkable illustration stuff, and I was shocked, not really shocked, but really interested to find out he's been doing a lot of these in Photoshop and using a Cintiq. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, holy crap, we've got to get him on the show, just kind of give us an idea of what he's been doing with this stuff. And you can see on screen right there is some of the art that he's been really just kind of playing around with and doing some.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff on my website are step-by-step instructions also.
Yeah, this is what I'm showing right here. He starts you, here's the blank canvas, and then he starts sketching out, and he does all that. How much do you love the Cintiq?
I can't live without it. I just absolutely love it. It blows my mind.
It's so much more natural feel.
Yeah, well, the cool thing about the Cintiq also is that I still do a lot of traditional art, and I do large paintings and that sort of thing. And so now I do all of my comps, and I work out all of my compositional things right on my Cintiq, printed out.
Even for your oil paintings?
Even for my oil paintings, yeah.
So,
do you find yourself sketching on a piece of paper and then all of a sudden thinking undo?
There's a lot of times when I work myself into a hole and I wish I could.
It's like, man, why didn't I have undo on this piece of paper?
All right, so I'm just going to give it to Aaron now. Let him tell us about what he's got and what he's going to show us today.
Okay, well, I do a lot of artwork. I do my own personal work, which is, if you'll see on my website, a lot of animal paintings and that sort of thing. But I also, through the years and the different films that I've worked on, I've been a character designer, animator, that sort of thing. And since we kind of came into the digital age, I came from 2D background, hand-drawn animation, into doing digital animation. And so when we made that transition, I realized, you know what? I fought Photoshop. I was a pencil and paper kind of guy, and but I finally decided about 6-7 years ago that I better make the transition. So I started doing digital art. And what it did for me is it really opened up a world. All of a sudden, through doing it over and over, I just discovered on my own some simple techniques. I by no means am a guy that's a Photoshop expert at all. So these are very simple techniques, and I bring a lot of my traditional training into this. So I'm going to take you through kind of this little elf design that I created at home. So the first thing I like to do is I'll set up my canvas, and I always like to put a tone down, a mid-tone. It doesn't matter if it's warm or cool, but I like it to be a mid-tone because I can go lighter and I can go darker, and I can see the balance between the two. So once I have that established, I got this light blue tone, then I'll do a sketch. And I'm going to just kind of go through my different layers rather than draw for you guys. But and it's a very rough sketch. This is kind of a profile of this little elf kind of character that I had in my head, and I scribbled it out. So once I get a scribble that I like, then I'll go in and I'll lighten it. Like here, I'll bring it way, way down, because then right on top of that, I want to get my refined drawing. And so I'll refine that and get something that looks a little bit better. And I'll work that, and then once I get that to where I like it, and I still keep things pretty loose. You can see it's fairly loose here. The next thing I want to do is I want to just start throwing down some color. And I want you guys to realize that, you know, it's the beauty of Photoshop is that you can be loose and free and
so much
you know,
freedom, yeah.
Exactly. And so the first thing I do is once I get this drawing down, I'll put a layer underneath. And what I like to do is lay down my local color. Now, local color is the color of an object, not lit and not in shadow. It's just kind of what the basic color is. And so from there, I just rough in a local color. And here you can see it's pretty vibrant, and it looks kind of garish. But I'm gonna work it.
I notice you're conveniently keeping all these elements on their own layer.
I keep everything separated. I mean, to a ridiculous amount.
Advantages of using Photoshop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because sometimes I'll get in there and I'll get 550 brush strokes into something and realize, oh, I didn't like it, and then I just make sure everything's on its own layer. So one thing I did here is I put a little gradation behind it. And you can see I'll turn that on and off. You'll see the gradation come on and off, just to get her to pop a little bit. So now we're starting to feel it. So the next thing I want to do is I want to lay in a rough shadow layer, and so I'll turn that on and off. And on this one, usually what I'll do is I'll just literally grab that local color, go into my color wheel, and drop it into a cooler, darker tone. So from there, I continue with my shadows here. I start to find form. You can see I've started working the cheeks, the arms, that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, we're starting to get a little bit of an illustration starting to happen. So I'm just going to start going through some of these
Aaron,
layers.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
On the shadows, are you doing it at 100% color?
No.
Or
No. I drop down on my. I go up to my opacity. I drop it down, and it's almost like, you know, I try to make it as traditional feeling as I can make it. Yeah. So to me, it's like working like a piece of pastel. Right. And I'm just gently working it.
And building the effect up?
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, and then sometimes I'll use my smudge tool. Now what I like to do with my smudge tool is I'll grab like a splatter brush, and that gives you some broken edges, which makes it feel very organic. Yeah. Right. So then moving forward, you'll see I start refining my shadows a little bit more. The ear is starting to get some more form. I want to pull that ear out from the leaves behind it, so I darken the area behind it. And then here, if I click back and forth, you'll see I'm starting to put now I'm moving over to my highlights. And so I'm adding, and that starts working the form there. Now on this next layer, what I love to, one of the things I love to do in my illustrations that really show off form, and it works really well for the people that I'm creating a design for, is I love to use alternate light sources. I use more than one light source and more than one temperature. And it just gives it a cool feel, and you can see form a little bit better. So here, when I turn this layer on, you'll start to see that I've got this warm underlight coming up, as if she's looking into a lit pool, you know? So continuing forward, I've got some more highlights, and so now I'm really starting to, you know, and one of the things I want to reiterate is, as I'm starting to model the character, especially the highlights and that sort of thing, I start to work on top of the drawing. So eventually, I want that line drawing to just kind of go away. Right. And as the form starts to build up in the way that it is here, I'll go back to my drawing, and I'll drop that opacity down, because now the illustration's working on its own. I don't need the line drawing as much. And so now it's starting to feel a little bit more 3D. So I drop it down to, you know, probably in the 30% range. So now we're starting to get some kind of cool feel to it. So now I'm gonna continue up, and this is where it starts getting pretty cool. So now I thought on this one, I thought, you know what, I'm going to add this.
Yeah, I've been bored so far. So.
I really like doing rim lights, you know, and showing those forms. So on here, I added this blue rim light on her, and that really starts to pop it, you know. So now I'm starting to get the form, I'm starting to get the painting, I'm starting to really like what's happening. Now, this is the fun part. What I started doing, and I know everybody does this, but this was a big epiphany for me, is when I realized I could take my digital photos and bring them over and mix them with my illustrations. And what I love to do is I'll play with the opacity of a texture of skin. I have libraries and libraries of skin. And I start laying them over bring them into free transform, warp them, and that's how I give my illustrations texture. So on this particular version, I have an eyeball, and my lovely girlfriend, Janelle Kislich, who's sitting in the audience over here, I had her come over and pose for me, and I took a picture of her eye in profile to match the illustration that I'd done, and rather than me just sitting down and rendering an eye, I know I can do it, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to take a photo because I want this illustration to be photoreal. So here it is, I turn it on, and boom, I've got this eye that I cut it out from the photo that I took. I drag it over, resize it, warp it, and then I actually shift the color a little bit, and then I take my eraser on an airbrush setting and I smooth out those edges so I don't have a hard edge, and then I can paint right into it. So now I've got this really cool kind of eyeball that's sitting in this illustration that I've got, and now I can start to work it. So now what I do from here is I start just kind of working the eye. I want to add, you know, little details here and there. I was looking at some cat eyes and how a cat's eye is dark, and you know, so I was just adding some fun little layers to it. And then here I thought, you know what? Maybe some spots, you know, she's this elf character. And the cool thing about these spots, too, is they start to describe form. As they curve over the shoulder, so they work in conjunction with the modeling that I've created. And now, so in the same way that I put the eye in there, I start grabbing, I took a lot of photos of Janelle's face, and I start going in, and I pose her in the same profile, and I start going into these photos, and I light it in a way that, first of all, is lit the same way as the illustration. But then I grab pieces, like mosaics. I'll grab a piece of her cheek, and I'll drag it over, drop the opacity down, jam up the contrast, so it'll show up, and then I lay it over the painting, so the painting will show through, and then you'll get a little bit of a texture. And that's what this next layer, it might be a little hard to see. Let me blow it up for the screen, so that when I go back and forth between here, you can see that texture really kind of brings it to life. It's kind of cool. And the same thing I do, I'm gonna go to the ear, turn that on, and look at those, the texture there kind of gets kind of cool. And so I'm just gonna continue on, and here I added some forehead texture. You can see me going back and forth between that. And this is where it really starts to become real. This section here, I'm doing some work inside the ear. I'm just gonna kind of fly through because I think I'm running a little bit long. But this is kind of cool because I added some of that rim light and some eye details, and this is where I can go in and some of those textures in the face, I can actually paint into those and bring them up. So then here I'm just going to continue in. I've got more details there.
So let me ask you about a project like this. How many layers will you end up with at the end, and how long for something like this?
Well, I always have to remind myself. I used to be really good at naming my layers and doing all that. I'll end up with a bunch of them, and then I have to go back and consolidate. But you know, it really depends. It can be any number of layers.
It really depends on the level of detail you
want. Exactly, exactly. So I'm going to continue in here. There's some different.
I just love seeing how you've taken and just added these little touches, and I think that's what makes it so good, is that you have really been excellent in just tacking in those little things that we wouldn't notice when we first look at it, but then we realize, oh, that makes sense. You've got that highlight, you've got that shadow.
Right. And then here, you know, here's, I'm just going to run through here and just start adding details. Back here, you saw me add the highlights on the leaves, and here I just start adding highlights and shadows, and the form just kind of emerges out of it. And then I'll start adding that kind of that blue rim lighting that I was talking about earlier. I'm going to bring that down a little bit so we can see a little bit more of it. And then in here, I just wanted to darken some of the edges and pull that out. And so then I decided, you know, I want to darken that background and put a kind of a blurred texture in the background. So I added this, and that really, now she starts to pop.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love to do is a very shallow depth of focus. And so I'll grab my smudge tool on an airbrush setting, and I'll go in and I'll lightly start to smudge certain areas that are further away from the eye, and I can really start to play with the depth of field. And then what I'll also do is I'll repeat I'll condense everything, repeat the layers, and I'll blur out certain sections and recombine them so that ultimately, at the end, I'm going to kind of jump to the end of the illustration. You've got this image where the focus kind of goes in and out, and let me, there we go. And I reapplied another texture over the top to make it feel a little worn and weathered. And there we have an elf illustration.
That's awesome.
That's horrible. Okay, I'm done. Aaron, that's amazing, man.
Oh, thanks. And
I think it's very interesting that, especially, you know, I mean, you obviously said come from a traditional background, but with Photoshop, and I mean, think about it in the old days. If somebody did a painting and you looked at it and you're like, oh, that's great. How did you do that? They would only be able to explain it. In this case, you can actually turn off the layers.
I love it.
And see each individual element build that up. And I thought that was very interesting how each layer seemed to contain something very subtle.
Yeah.
But added piling it on top of that ultimately forms that illustration.
Yeah, because that's something I want to reiterate. I by no means am a Photoshop guy. I'm not technical. So nothing in here that I've done is difficult.
You've got a command of a critical aspect of Photoshop, and that is layers. Being able to utilize layers in this way.
Play with layers.
And not just for photographers, but for designers to be able to take, and illustrators to be able to take and utilize layers in this way is one of the key reasons layers was developed. So I can't say no more. I'm blown away. Aaron, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Would you mind joining us for the next show?
Absolutely.
I'm sure the viewers wouldn't mind it because they're busy picking their mouths up off the floor right now.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we take a break? We'll come back. We'll have a little contest. We'll give away something, and then we'll wrap up the show.
Fantastic. Let's do that. And we're back. So we're going to wrap things up really quick by doing some giveaways. Now, before we tell you how to win prizes, let's tell you what the prizes are.
What are the prizes today, Corey?
Today, we need cheesy music in the background. We have here first the Adobe Illustrator 6. Adobe.
Wow.
I lost my wording there. The Wow Book by Sharon Stewart. Great Wow Book. This is, if you really want to get a command of Illustrator, I have actually used several of these books. They're awesome to have. As well as Photoshop Lightroom from Snapshots, 2 great shots by our own friend.
Our good buddy, Jeff Ravel.
Our good buddy, Jeff Ravel, right here. He is phenomenal stuff.
He just does great stuff for us. We love him as a guy, but also as a writer. Phenomenal book. So we're going to give that away. How do we do it?
How do they do that?
Well, Corey, we have them go over to kelbytv.com. That's kelbytv.com/contest. And when you go over there, you're going to select the show, and you're going to go to PhotoshopUser TV. You're going to fill in your name, your email, your website, and the fact that Pete is much better looking than Corey. And then you're going to send that in, and one lucky winner is going to get that.
Opinion, maybe.
Great opinion.
Reaching. All right. Be sure to check that out. Leave a comment, request, anything you'd like to see. We are going to go ahead and end the show there. I want to thank Aaron again for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure.
That was brilliant stuff. I can't wait to see more.
And we're going to see another one on the next one. Stick around with us.
He might have a surprise for us. All right. So we'll see you guys next time. We'll take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.